What's up, Thrashers? According to my thrash metal shirt, everybody here's a Thrasher! Welcome back to 5 Questions with Levi, The Return, episode number 4. Yeah, we've been going fairly strong with the return of this series. I really missed doing this series. I just kind of wanted to take a break from doing that a few years ago. But now that we're back doing this, I feel a lot better about doing this show nowadays than I did back in the day. But we got some more good questions. Of course, we're getting a couple of regulars, but I will say to anybody out there who is watching this, feel free to ask me a question regarding sports and entertainment involving movies, music, television, video games, you know, wrestling. I'd like to see more wrestling questions. I don't get very many of those anymore. People want to constantly ask me NASCAR questions. Nothing against that, but I would like to see some more variety. That's all I wanted to say, because I feel like I end up answering the same stuff over and over again, and I feel like nobody deserves to hear the same stuff over and over again. You guys want different stuff. So if you guys who are watching this have never asked me a question before, send them in the comments section below. 1 question per user, although I am breaking the rule this one time because we got a first timer, and I'm going to give them a break. But anyways, let's get to the questions! Question number 1 comes from Keith Miller Jr., a regular of the series. Who is the funniest person on YouTube, in your honest opinion? Oh boy, there are quite a few funny people that I watch or used to watch on YouTube. As far as like some of the like typical ones, I would say, you know, Epic Mealtime, Harley Mornstein's pretty funny. Uber Haxer Nova always used to crack me up back in, especially in his rage days. But for me, honestly, Kamikaze Games always makes me laugh during his rage moments, or when he brings up something funny, like in one of his stupid comments videos, he was talking about reading a comment of a dude saying, delete his channel, delete, 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 then he goes, the only thing that should have been deleted was you during your fetal stage. Like, where does he come up with this shit? It's stuff I wish I could come up with. If only I had the wittiness of someone like Kamikaze, or even a Harley Mornstein, or Uber Haxer Nova, or anybody that I find funny, then I don't know what would happen with me. I don't know if my brain would get poisoned by that or not, or if it'd be a blessing. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of sounds more like a blessing and a curse to an extent, because, you know, sometimes you can end up saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, especially in certain situations. But regardless, if I had to choose one person of who I think is the funniest person on YouTube, it would be Kamikaze. Not being biased because he's one of my best friends, but he really does make me laugh. You know, when he's angry and cursing up a storm, it makes me laugh. When he says some quick one-liners, it makes me laugh. Although another guy, Seth Cole from the NNSCRA, he's pretty funny. And it just happens out of nowhere. And yeah, he's a good Christian boy. Yeah, he'll come up with funny stuff. Like at one time, we were playing Cards Against Humanity. The video's on YouTube on the channel if you want to go back and check it out for yourself. It's a Cards Against Humanity moment involving fellatio, a.k.a. another phrase for a blowjob. And our buddy Carson went, "Ah!" And Seth goes, sounds like Carson's giving one right now. And it's like, whoa, you went there, and yet you're a good Christian boy, and you went that far. And he's like, why am I still thinking about it? Like, it happens, and when it happens unexpectedly, it's great. But if I had to choose one, I'd go with Kamikaze. Question number 2 comes from BlazeLife334. What's your opinion on these bands? Godsmack, Killswitch Engage, Ice 9 Kills, All That Remains, Shadows Fall, Unearth, Stained, and Revocation. That's a lot of bands, and I think I noticed a correlation. All these bands are Massachusetts bands, because I know you're from Mass. Same with your pal, Space Metal Ferrari, or Alex Ferranti. So yeah, about Massachusetts bands, you forgot another one, Aerosmith. But anyways, I'll just stick to these particular ones. Alright, to start off, Godsmack, they were one of my favorite bands growing up when I was first getting into rock and metal music as a kid. I actually have 2 of their albums. I have their self-titled debut and 4. I do want to eventually get Awake and Faceless, and I'd have basically all I could really want from Godsmack. After 4, they kind of go up and down, especially their last album I thought was terrible, When Legends Rise. Like, that album can go fuck itself. But yeah, big Godsmack fan. Always like Sully Erna's voice. Kind of sounded like a mix of, excuse me, of Lane Staley and James Hetfield a little bit. Killswitch, they were another one that I really dug. First getting into the more extreme side of metal, like the metalcore stuff. I gravitated towards them, and I have 3 of their albums. I have End of Heartache, As Daylight Dies, and Disarmed to Descent. Although I do want to eventually get Alive or Just Breathing. And then I'd be pretty much set with the Killswitch catalog, personally. Everything else I feel is mediocre to okay. Ice Nine Kills, that's the one band on your list that I really have no opinion about because I've not really listened to them. And judging from other people's thoughts about this band, yeah, it doesn't sound like a band I'd probably want to get into anytime soon. Excuse me. All That Remains, used to like All That Remains until Phil Labonte decided to make the band into a overly commercial product that betrayed what they were all about. At least until recently, on their last album, they seemed to kind of come back to what they were good at, and that was the melodic death metal or metalcore style of things. Like, really, everything All That Remains did up until after Overcome came out. Like, after Overcome, I wouldn't give 2 flying fucks about All That Remains. Plus, it doesn't help that Phil Labonte is an SJW dumbass who doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But regarding the music, their early stuff's great. You know, Fall of Ideals was a great album. You know, it's just their modern stuff I can't get into because it's like they sacrificed what they were good at in favor of radio success, which they didn't really get, and Phil Labonte is an idiot, but that's just me. Shadows Fall, probably out of all these bands, neck and neck with Godsmack being my favorite. Shadows Fall, a lot of people want to call them a metalcore band, and I don't get it. They don't do this, I mean, yeah, there's the hardcore growling and the melodic singing of metalcore, but I'll tell you one thing that doesn't make them a metalcore band: guitar solos. They're very much in the same vein as Trivium, where they often get lumped in the metalcore when they don't fit the bill. Both of these bands I consider thrash bands or thrash-tinged bands, and Shadows Fall is a great band. Hope they come back together at some point in the future and put out a new album. It's been 9 years since their last album, after they kind of split off and each member's been doing their own thing. You know, Jason Bittner currently playing drums for the legendary Overkill. Jonathan Tene, now guitar player in the legendary Anthrax. Brian Fair trying to get his old band Overcast going again. Don't know what Paul, the bass player, is doing, or Matt, the other guitarist, and the other singer is doing. But, yeah. Unearth, I feel like out of all the metalcore bands, they are, even though I've not really listened to them much, I can acknowledge they're probably the best metalcore band of all time, because they don't go over super indulgent with, or too self-indulgent with the constant breakdowns and stuff. They do a perfect balance of heaviness and catchiness, even throwing in some melodic death metal and thrash metal influence in there. While I've not listened to much of their stuff, what I have heard, I do like. Stained, I mean, early Stained's good. They got some good songs, but I'm just going to leave it at that. And then finally, Revocation, I feel, is one of the best American extreme metal bands going right now in that tech death thrash world. Like, they fused the 2 genres together. Like, their last album was more death metal than their more thrashy style of the albums prior. And I'm curious to see what they got up their sleeves for their next album whenever that comes out. Hopefully this year, and we'll see how it goes. Question number 3 from Tom Todd 774 or 774. What was your initial reaction when Kyle Busch got knocked out of the chase after the Roval? Well, even though I wasn't watching much during that time, or really, yeah, not watching, but keeping up with it, I was surprised. Like, you would have thought Kyle Busch would have made it far in the chase. And yeah, up until Texas, he was about to go on a winless season. And I was hoping he'd have a winless season just to see what the hell would happen. But he had to get a win at Texas to kind of get his inferiority complex back, so what can you do with that? But yeah, I was honestly surprised. Like, I thought he was going to pull a win out of his ass somehow, some way to get into the round of 8. But it just wasn't meant to be for him, I guess, so. Question number 4 from a fake Dimebag Daryl account, but regardless. He does ask a really good question, though. Which era of music was better, 80s, 90s, or neither? I'm going to go with the 80s, not just in the metal world. I'll talk about the metal stuff here in just a moment, but even in, like, pop music, it was great. Like, you had some great pop songs that you still know and remember to this very day. Like, the 80s was a huge decade, not just for our music, but for pop. But to the real savior of the 80s, the metal stuff, you know, you kick off the decade with 2 emerging styles. Glam metal here in the States, and the new wave of British heavy metal over in, well, England. They were both the 2 top fledgling styles entering the decade for different reasons. And we're not talking about the glam stuff that came out later in the 80s where it became just derivative of one another. We're talking the early glam stuff that was great. You know, Motley Crue, Quiet Riot, Wasp, Dokken, Rat, Hanoi Rocks, even though they were a Finnish band. But, yeah, and then the new wave of British heavy metal, Iron Maiden, Motorhead, early Def Leppard, Venom, Saxon, Diamond Head, Samson, Tigers of Pantang, Tank, so many bands. And then as the decade goes along, you get the emerging subgenres of metal that pretty much have taken over my life. The big one being thrash. You know, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Anthrax, Sepultura, Testament, Exodus, Overkill, Sodom, Creator, Destruction, Death Angel, Dark Angel, Possessed, so many others. Black metal coming into being, Bathory, Hellhammer to an extent, you know, and then Sarcophago coming along and a bunch of others. And then death metal coming into being, you know, Death, Morbid Angel, Obituary, the early ones. Grindcore coming in, Napalm Death, early Carcass, Terrorizer. There's just so many. Progressive metal comes into its infancy officially. You could argue Rush may have invented it in the 70s, but in the 80s, you know, you had Queensryche, Fate's Warning, Sabotage. Towards the end of the decade, you saw Dream Theater come up. You know, there was just so much doom metal becoming its own thing. You know, St. Vitus, Candlemass, Pentagram, Trouble, so many bands. The 80s was just an amazing time for metal music. I will comment on the 90s. To the people that say metal in the 90s was bad and it was on the way out, you guys are crazy, because if anything, metal was growing and it went back to the underground, you know, especially over in Europe. Like, the fledgling metal scenes of the 90s, I would say, would be the Norwegian black metal scene, Swedish death metal, Florida death metal, and I would say, perhaps for another scene, why not Swedish black metal? They were all just huge scenes during, and German power metal too. All fledgling scenes in the 90s that kept everything going. While mainstream-wise, Pantera kept the heavier side of metal going mainstream-wise, so I can give them credit there. But to people who say the 90s was a terrible time for metal, it wasn't. It's a false narrative that's been completely overwritten, that grunge killed metal. If anything, it killed the hair bands. It didn't kill anything else. So, that's just more or less my opinion about this question. And finally, question 5. It's the double-dipping one from my new good pal, Laney, who is on Twitch at Hi Hi, I'm Lainey on Twitch. I'll put a link of her Twitch in the description box for you guys to follow and or subscribe. She's a really sweet woman. She's really funny, really cool. We've recently become pals after I've raided her channel a couple of times. Help her get some new people to watch. And she's really cool. She's become a friend now. And she has 2 questions. Even though I said 1 question limit, I'll let it slide this time because we're good pals, so we'll do them. Hey Levi, I have 2 questions, but you don't have to answer both, and sorry if you've answered these before. No, you're totally good. First question out of the number 5. What are my favorite non-metal bands? Well, it would still mostly be within the rock realm. The thing is, I don't really listen to a whole lot of non-metal nowadays. But if I had to choose favorite non-metal bands, and I'm not going to include borderline bands that you would argue as metal, like AC/DC, Van Halen, Guns N' Roses, Rush, Scorpions, you know, bands like that. I'm going to leave them out because you could make an argument that they are heavy metal in some aspect. But like straight up non-metal, I would say, you know, Pink Floyd, Genesis, Yes, King Crimson, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Jethro Tull, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, Steve Miller Band is great. And I know you're a big fan of My Chemical Romance. I like a few of their songs, but the thing of it with me is I'm not as into the whole 2000s emo style. You know, I just feel like there are bands who take what they did lyrically before the emo movement existed and did it much more darker and much more sophisticated. You know, like a band like Catatonia, for example, who are a death doom band or gothic metal band. Kind of did that idea, and I felt just did it a little bit better in terms of darkness and so on and so forth. I'll send you some songs of theirs. But then, like, outside of rock, you know, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson when I'm in the mood for anything country, which is not that often. Same with rap. Like, I listen to Biggie, Tupac, Eminem if I'm in the mood for rap, which, again, doesn't happen that often. Hell, it's been a long time since I've really listened to a rap song in full for a while. But, yeah, most of the, why is my phone going stupid? But, yeah, most of the non-metal artists I listen to are still within the rock realm, because I'm just a rocker through and through. Excuse me. And then your final question, what are my top 3 favorite movies and why? Well, one of them, Avengers Endgame. The most recent movie. I just think that movie was just absolutely well done, well put together, wrapped up most of the stories heading into the movie so perfectly. You know, and you can't end with a better iconic moment than I am Iron Man. Snap of the fingers and Thanos dead. And Tony, unfortunately, dying. But yeah, Avengers Endgame, because I'm just such a big Marvel fan. I mean, hell, I got a Thor poster in the background. But other favorites, for a comedy, I like Pineapple Express. Even though I'm not a weed guy, Pineapple Express is fucking hilarious. Seth Rogen, James Franco. And then for the third movie, I'm gonna go with Toy Story 2. I'm a big Toy Story fan. I've not watched the 4th one yet. I do plan to watch it at some point or another. But yeah, Toy Story 2, such a great movie. And that does it for this episode of 5 Questions with Levi the Returned. This was the longest episode by far. You guys asked some pretty deep questions. And let's keep getting more of these. In fact, I think this might be the first premiere episode of the show, now that I think about it, because we've been going almost 20 minutes recording this. But again, to you guys watching that want to ask me questions for next week's episode, episode 5, 1 question per user in the comments section below of this video, and I will answer them next week. But until then, this is ThrashManiac99, horns high, see you next week.
Hells, do you know how to use
Dude! Really? I was literally in the freaking menu. God.
Ow!
I literally just freaking spawned.
Well, Tails, time to die.
No one isn't. No one isn't.
Why is everybody coming over here?
Yeah, wait.
No!
What?
We're gonna have a nice day.
We're not
together.
open
Is this
right
our
now.
First date?
We're not open here, mister. Damn it! What the? No fire!
I died from my own grenade!
Can the fire go away, please? Thank you.
Oh my.
The pigeon struck
How much
again!